I'd like to read from Isaiah 56. And I'm reading from the Message Bible because I felt that was appropriate since Eugene Peterson passed away this last week. So it might be a little bit different to what you're used to, but for me as a young person, reading this version of the Bible actually gave me a hunger to study the Word of God again. So I love it. So let me read to you from the Message Bible. Guard my common good. Do what's right and do it in the right way. For salvation is just around the corner. My setting things right is about to go into action. How blessed are you who enter into these things, you men and women who embrace them, who keep the Sabbath and don't defile it, who watch your step and don't do evil things. Make sure no outsider who now follows God ever has an occasion to say, God put me in second class. I don't really belong. And make sure no physically mutilated person is ever made to think, I'm damaged goods. I don't really belong. For God says, to the mutilated who keep my Sabbath and choose what delights me and keep a firm grip on my covenant, I'll provide them an honoured place in my family and within my city, even more honoured than the sons and daughters. I confer permanent honour on them that will never be revoked. And as for outsiders who follow me, working for me, loving my name, and wanting to be my servant, all who keep the Sabbath and don't defile it, holding fast to my covenant, I'll bring them to my holy mountain and give them joy in my house of prayer. They'll be welcome to worship the same as insiders, to bring burnt offerings and sacrifices to my altar. Oh yes, my house of worship will be known as a house of people for a prayer for all people. The decree of the Master, God himself, who gathers in the exiles of Israel. I will gather also. I gather others also. Gather them in, those already gathered. As I read this scripture in preparation for tonight, I couldn't help to think how fitting that was for who we are as a people. Sometimes I think we can go along and believe we're churches and we include people in, and we don't always take the time to think, why do we include people? Well, we include people because God is inclusive. And not just the God of the New Testament as seen through Jesus, but God in the Old Testament as well. And I believe the scripture today tells us that the heart of God is that all will be included. And that's our job, is to include them. Fortunately, we're not in the business of having to save them or make them right or do anything. Our job, as the scripture says tonight, is just to make sure they never feel like second citizens, that they never feel like they don't belong, that they have the right place to belong. I found that very encouraging, and I think as a network that's something that we stand for. We are called the Community Outreach Network because the community are important to us, not as outsiders, but are those who are included as insiders. And sometimes being an insider may look a little bit different nowadays to what it used to look like, attending every week and all those sorts of things. Being an insider looks different. Sometimes it's hard to tell who's in and out. I think that's a good thing. It's a God thing. It's a moment the church is in, and I think it's a very good time to be church in this place. I think we can rejoice tonight that we follow a God who is an inclusive God. And look around, aren't we glad? Because a lot of us would not be included if he wasn't. But we are. And so we can rest assured that God is the one who includes all people. And our job is to make sure that they never feel excluded. Why don't we take a moment to pray. Loving God, we come before you, knowing our part in your kingdom, wanting desperately to live that action out. But if we are honest, there are times that we don't do that. We exclude some people, or we make them feel like they don't belong. Sometimes, Lord, we do it on purpose, and sometimes we don't. And so for those times, Lord, when we have failed to include people and love them and help them to belong as we should, as you would want us to, we ask that you forgive our actions. Loving God, you also know that we can sometimes shoot off at the mouth, which can make people feel like they're not loved or cared for, or considered or included. For those times, Lord, when our mouth runs away with us, we ask that you forgive us. We thank you that you are a loving God who always forgives us, and we take a deep breath at this moment to accept that forgiveness in you. We pray, Lord, that you will also be with our world, those who are near, those who are far, for those who are in need in any way. And we give thanks for those who have had their need met. Lord, you know our hearts. We ask that you hear them tonight, for those things that we are thankful for, and for those things that we are concerned about. Hear our prayer, loving God. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Ruth Mary, and thank you to the Broadview people for hosting us tonight in interesting circumstances. You didn't explain the situation, Ruth Mary.
Oh, you want me to?
I think it's hilarious.
And I love that our little ambient charismatics. Pentecostal music.
So what happened tonight is ages ago when we first agreed, I booked the church, which was great. And then we have the Pentecostal church that use our church on a Sunday night. That was great. And they spoke to Ione, and she booked that as well. And then we both have a shared calendar. So we should both know what's going on in the church. So we are mutually responsible. So I got here tonight, we set up in the garden, that was lovely. I was setting up the church and plugging it in, ready to go, when about 15 people walked in the door. Not from here, and not any of you. So I said, I've got a meeting here tonight. I've got 35 people coming. They said, oh, well, we've booked the church and we've got 60 people coming. So I won't tell you what I said, because it's probably not appropriate in this company. But you know me, so you all know what I said. And so then I called Ione, and she said the same thing I said, actually. So we worked it out. We decided to meet here after karate, and because karate finished at 7, and the boys for karate are very loving and kind and generous, and so I was able to, because then of course our Pentecostal people were very upset about this all going on, so I just went up to the pastor and I said, you know what, brother, it does not matter, because the house of God is full tonight.
So thank you for hosting us tonight. Now we move to our AGM, and then we will move into our guest to hearing from our guest speakers. So you should have hopefully received some papers care of Brian, who I'm missing terribly. Anyway, we're battling on. The executive are battling on. So we've had some spare copies. See, I'm missing. We've had a few apologies. Coles and Jenny Scott's from Wollonga, Douglas Velby and Don from Noarlunga.
Also, Ian Hunter from Semaphore has one friend apology.
Thank you.
And Hewitt from Seacliff.
And from Seacliff, right. Right. Coles, Jenny Escott's, I think it is. Douglas Velby and Don all from, and Anne Hewitt, who's now at Seacliff. And Ian Hunter, who's at Semaphore.
Lynn Powell from the corner.
Who?
Lynn Powell from the corner.
Lynn Powell from the corner. Now Brian has that printed off the attendance sheets, Glenys, so he's going to, they're going around, so apologies should be marked on there anyway. Okay. So yes, which leads me to my next point. Those should be working their way through the group. Right, so please fill them in. And yes, thanks to the executive for all stepping up. Glenys is doing the minutes and did name tags. David, I've lost mine, sorry. I'm Rebecca. David's looking after the videoing so we can put it on YouTube. Val's done some things, yeah. There are lots of communications. So that's good. Now we had the minutes from the AGM last year that were sent around. Have people had a chance to read them? Because our time frame's a bit shortened. I was going to read them, but I don't think I will. But if people had a chance to look at them, does it all ring a bell from 12 months ago? Yes. Would someone like to move that we accept these? Karen, Bruce, all those in favour? Karen Brown, is it?
Main.
Karen Main, sorry. And Bruce Davis, and passed. Passed, right. Right, now I'm the key liaison person, and I have to write, one of my jobs is to write a report for a synod, which Brian attached, and send around to you. So again, I hope you've had a chance to read that. It's really just a summary of what we've done in the last 12 months, and a little bit of thinking about next year. If you go to synod, you can read it again, in the boring bits. There will be no boring bits in this synod, will there? So, are there any questions about that report? No? Good. Now, the only election we actually have to make at this meeting is of a key liaison person. So I need someone to... Jeff, would you mind sharing this little bit, please?
Do we need to accept the report?
Do we need to accept my report? Let's accept my report. All right, thank you. So let's... Thank you. Excellent. It's in the preparatory papers, so yeah.
With Mary second.
This is just electing a key liaison.
This is just to elect the key liaison person, who is currently Rebecca. So,
And she's nominated again?
and there's two nominations from Ruth, Mary and Dennis. So those in favour? Is anyone disappointed that they've been nominated?
Right, now the other, another attachment, thank you for your affirmation by the way, another attachment was the budget. Actually, Brian, do you want to talk through this?
Only if there's any questions, so I can block my way through.
He did try to explain to me earlier. Ken, yes.
There's a typing error in the budget.
Right.
On the top right-hand side, the second item, 2,500, probably should be 3,000. The next figure should be 33,000, which right down the bottom then adds up to the 41,800.
Okay.
So something needs to be adjusted. I don't know whether it's a typing error or whether one of the figures needs to be changed.
Yeah, the 325. Yes, the total administration probably needs to be 32,500.
And right down the bottom is the 41,800, correct? Because the figures don't add up to that.
That one is.
So I just made up some figures. I thought if the 2,500 was 3,000 and the 32,000 becomes 33, then it all adds up to 41,800.
Oh, no, I did this a month ago.
Well, the approved budget for last year was 33, so it should be, we don't usually spend less money.
No.
No.
It's not my experience of life. Let's make it 33 and then Ken's figures work. All right. One of the variances is that Brian finished in his role when? End of September, and we haven't appointed anyone yet. I'll talk about that later. So that's why we've got a bit of extra cash flowing around. But we are in the process of that. So with those little changes, we're happy to accept the budget. Yes, Malcolm and...
I apologise for being an auditor.
No, I'm glad you're an auditor. We need to be kept honest. Malcolm Rawlings and Ken McLean. All those in favour? Ken McLean? All those in favour? Yes, the budget is passed. Thank you. Now, a couple of housekeeping things about how to spend our money and how to make our money. We've, for a couple of years now, had our grants capped at $1,000. Are people happy to keep it at $1,000? I think it's been out for 2 or 3 years. Right. I guess we better have approval of that. We have a show of hands. Yes, that's passed. and that our contributions from local churches remains at 2%. That's all approved as well. We don't actually nominate a PRC, pastoral, what's the other one? Pastoral Relations and Placements Committee rep, because that is part of the job description of the administrative pastoral care worker. And because Brian finished, I'm filling in that role for, I've done September and October, and at this stage I'll be doing November too. So that's just to let you know what happens there. The current executive is David Pryor, although he's just accepted a placement in a non-COM network. We'll speak sternly to him about non-COM church. We'll to speak to him about that. Douglas Monaghan, Glennis Badger, Mark Hewitt, me and Val Hall. We're all happy to stay on. If anyone else would like to join the executive, we have very nice gatherings at the corner where they have very nice coffee. So if you are interested, please speak to one of us after the meeting. And then we have a grant approval team, which is currently Anne Tyne, David Badger and Peter Moss. I'm not sure what Peter's doing. You're on it too, Ada. Val, sorry. Peter's retiring, has retired. So I think someone was supposed to ask what his intentions were. So, but again, if you're interested in that role, please speak to one of us. I've got a couple of other things I wanted to share with you, and then hand over to Grant, unless there's other business from other people. Just on the administrative pastoral care worker, yes, Malcolm.
Everybody's on there?
All right, so as alluded to, Brian finished in his role. I've been in negotiation with Synod. I thought it'd be very simple, just, you've had someone in a job for 10 years, you just replace them. No. Oh, naive of me. So back and forth, trying to get the job description sorted out. I mean, parts of it were quite out of date, but it is taking a little longer than I thought. But I think we're very close to advertising. I have reminded you all, if you know anyone who might be interested, please get them to contact me. I've had a couple of expressions of interest. So keep that in mind. We are getting close to having someone, and I'm happy to talk about it with anyone after the gathering. And just a little advert for something happening tomorrow night, which I know is quite short notice, but a few people may be interested, and some of you may have heard about this. The Urban Mission Network with Unity and Friends will host a drinks and cheese evening tomorrow night from 6 to 8 at Church of the Trinity on Goodwood Road. This is a time of conversation, storytelling, learning from one another, and reflecting on what it means to be an open and affirming church as we discern our response to same-gender marriage within the context of the Assembly decision and the upcoming Presbyterian Synod meeting. Stories from members of Unity and Friends and articles arising from the recent UCA Assembly will guide our conversations. So if you're interested in that, come and get the details from me after the meeting. I think that's all. Was there any other business people want to raise, any other notices? No? Well, I'm going to hand over to Grant in a minute, but Glennis had the idea of, she's going to run through all the churches that are in our network, and if you belong to that church, please pop up in your seat. Grant's the Church of Christ Minister, so he doesn't know us, so this is a good reason to do it, as well as it's good for us to remember who's in our network.
Thanks, Rebecca. I thought we might have run out of time to do this. As a kind of country bumpkin member of this lot, because Yankalina and Co, that's not country these days, like really. We've turned up at these things, and somebody today even remembered waving at us when we used to come by Skype, when Brian used to try and Skype us into meetings, and we're really grateful he did that for so long. And I kind of go, I don't know these people, which is why I've been running around making you wear name badges, and they were really cheap and they fall off, and now Brian's handed me real ones, so next time we'll be right. And so I had a list of all the network places on my phone, which is very trendy and young of me, I think. Now I just can't find my phone. So you can see I may just drop stop them in the toilet. I'm ever hopeful that when I get home it will be on the counter where I was so carefully looking up at. But I've got the list here.
Have you
So
read yourself?
I thought I'd get David to, and then I couldn't find him either. He's here filming, so I'm standing there pretending I know what to do, and I know where he is. And anyway. Okay, the very most important person here tonight is Jack Crossfield. Right up the back, our grandson, who's with us for a couple of days band workshop in Adelaide that fitted in beautifully. His parents, our daughter and son-in-law, pastor the Apostolic Church in Glossop in the Riverland, and so he's well used to boring church meetings. He's at the top key. Thanks for coming, Jack. All right, so tonight, I'll just say the name of the church because I've got the list here. Hop up and say your name and sit down. You don't have to tell us anything else other than that. Anyone here from Ascot community? I know there are. And can we name off from this way?
Bronte Wilson.
Sure. Harry May.
Thank you very much. And Athelston.
Hello, Ben the driver.
Victoria Petter.
Thank you. Barbara.
Yay! David Badger.
Dennis Badger. Larry. Nix. All right, it's a long way to come. Broadview. Oh, no, they've come out of the kitchen. Let's start with you, Merle. Was it Merle? I remember that.
Doris, stand up.
I didn't ever get to Doris. It's one that I missed the name tag, but you look busy. Yes, Merle and Judith. And then we'll go here. I didn't get you either. Oh, because you're all in the kitchen. Usually I end up there. And at the back?
Leslie Williams.
Leslie Williams.
Judith Redan.
Yes.
Rhonda George. Margaret Brereton.
Ruth Mary Bond.
Oh, thank you. Campbelltown.
I'm Bruce Davis. I'm here to look after Rebecca.
Very good. Chaplain at Edinburgh. No, Croydon Park. Ha. And
Diary Thompson. Eddie Randall.
thank you.
Jean.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking in the wrong place. Yes.
Jean Tinker. Carol Meyer.
Thank you. Devonport.
Cyril Lane.
Peter Perry.
Thank you. There's lots of us, aren't there? Dulwich Rose Park, no, Grange.
Paul Wiggum.
Terrific. His name keeps dropping off. Never mind. Mark. You. Oh, you're not listed, Harold, on this list. Do you want... and she's got a name tag. I will add you to this list. Henry Fuller. Malcolm Rawlings. Thank you. Laviva United Church Taparoo. Wow, well done. Marion Warradale.
Diane Bury.
Ken McLean.
Terrific. Noarlunga. We've got apologies from Noarlunga. Port Adelaide. No. Royal Park. No. Seacliff. No. Oh, well, this is quick. Seaton. Yes. Thanks, Esther. The Corner.
Belinda Tester.
Mark Hewitt.
Terrific. Trinity Aberton.
Sam Shine.
Betty Christensen.
Vermont. No. West Lakes. Oh! Here's the man with 2 name tags. Terrific, thank you.
Almost forgot.
Western Lip.
Una Davies.
Jeff Tiller.
Terrific. Willunga. Yankalilla. Nearly country, but not quite.
Kay Barnes.
Alan Barnes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for humouring me on that, and thank you, Rebecca, because it's probably helpful to some other people other than me. We'll do it every time.
Thank you for that. So, hope that helps Grant a little where we come from, and that's a mix of ministers and lay people, as I said to you in that text from the bus. Sophie and I were going to the Moon Lantern Festival on Saturday night, which was very, very good. Anyway, Grant is our guest speaker tonight. Grant's the minister at Blairastle Church of Christ, just down the road from here, and we did a lot of work together when I was here and became friends. Grant did his Masters through the Adelaide College of Divinity, and the topic was the church as a community of friends, hospitality and friendship as mission. And we've had a bit of a focus on hospitality this year, with Bruce Mary speaking about that, and so I thought we'd ask Grant. So, thank you, Grant.
So it was while I was at Blair Athol that I stumbled into or onto or over this thing of hospitality as mission. When I went to the church at Blair Athol, it was a small group of about 20 people who had recently moved from the Prospect Church of Christ up in Prospect into a rented bank building. I think 3 of the people in the congregation were wage earners, including the minister, and that was the church that I inherited. I was kind of burnt out when I went there. I thought that I was going there to help these older people grieve the loss of their precious 100-year-old building, chaplain them through that and bury them. I didn't know that God had other plans. And today, that church is a congregation of probably 60 or so people, if everyone turned up. We have an op shop running 5 days a week, which pulls about $1,500 a year. We have myself employed I was employed 4 days a week. We have the equivalent of 4 days a week. Pastoral ministry, we employ a community worker 1 day a week, and as I'm leaving, they're now talking about whether they might employ a minister to do some male mentoring for 1 day a week. So there you go. So it didn't quite work out the way that I thought it might. So what happened in stumbling over this hospitality as mission thing is that the church had employed this community worker with a grant, a community benefit essay grant in 2006, and he started just before me to establish a community drop-in centre. So that's what he did, and that drop-in centre still runs today with 80 or so people coming every week for a community meal and all sorts of other support. At the same time as I started there, I started my master's studies at the Adelaide College of Divinity, and so I was sort of reading and reflecting about different things, and my studies meshed with what was happening at Blair Athol, because I realised that all we had to do to have people come into the church at Blair Athol was open the doors and turn the lights on, and the kettle was always on anyway, and there was always food. Everything revolves around food at Blair Athol Church. And so I realised that this hospitality thing was that was all you really needed to do. You just needed to welcome people who came in the doors. And it was as simple as that, or as difficult as that. And then in my studies, I started looking at ancient hospitality practices and how important they were in the biblical tradition. And I began to wonder if the church had either lost sight of or become fearful of the essence of the ancient practice of hospitality, which at its heart was actually welcoming a traveller who was, by definition, a stranger. Right? Let me read you a story, a Bible story that you probably have heard or read before, from Genesis chapter 18. The Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw 3 men standing in front of him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, "My Lord, if I have found favour in your sight, don't pass by your servant. Let a bit of water be brought, wash your feet, rest yourselves under the tree, while I fetch a morsel of bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you can go on, since you have come to your servant." So they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham went quickly to the tent to Sarah and said, "Sarah, quickly, get 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes." And Abraham ran to the herd, selected a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant. He quickly prepared. I don't know how you quickly prepare it. Anyway, just takes a little while, having done this a couple of times. Then he took curds and milk and the calf which he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. So, this kind of hospitality that is about welcoming a traveller who is by definition a stranger, I sort of began to understand that it might be important to try and recover or relearn this kind of hospitality. First of all, because it's a long-standing characteristic of the people of God that goes back at least as far as Abraham. And secondly, because I was experiencing it in my ministry setting and reading about it in my literature reviews for my master's studies, that this kind of hospitality is inherently evangelistic and missional. So sometimes we do hospitality in the sense we put a meal on because we want to get people in so that we can preach the gospel to them. Maybe you don't do that, it happens in our churches. So the meal is actually the bait, right? Being blunt about it. But it doesn't have to be. The meal can be the mission. The hospitality can be the mission. And there is a kind of hospitality which is inherently missional and evangelistic. Amy Odin, and You're Welcome to Me, a source book of hospitality in early Christianity, wrote that hospitality is itself a means of grace, a form of proclamation of the good news of God's love. A few years ago, I kind of reconnected with John Smith. I don't think he remembered me, but I remembered him. Probably had been 40 years. He spoke at the Blackwood Church of Christ. So I went to hear him, and his musician, songwriter, leader got up and told his story. And his story was how when he'd been down and out and nobody cared for him, someone offered him hospitality. They took him in, gave him a room in their house, and today, or that day, he was travelling and proclaiming the gospel with John Smith from the God Squad, just because somebody gave him hospitality and took him in. So you can spend a lot of big money on evangelistic programs to bring people into the church, but my experience has been that you can significantly strengthen a church simply by being hospitable and by welcoming the people who come through our doors of their own free will, of their own accord, and showing them that they are welcome and they're welcome to belong. So I started to wonder then what's happened to this ancient practice of hospitality that is welcoming a traveller who is a stranger. Well, you know, we're all busy people, even ministers are busy, and you know, one of the frustrating things about ministry is that people keep getting in the way of ministry. Don't want to be wasting time with people. And actually, by the way, jokes aside, in my master's study, and one or two of you here have read my master's thesis, wasting time with people is one of my tenets of ministry now. Well, we're all busy. We're all on a mission. KPIs. Oh no, who can you trust anyway? You know, we've got this stranger danger thing, and stranger danger has infested the church, believe it or not. And other things have changed as well. We've now got hotels and motels for people to stay in overnight, so travellers don't need to stay in private homes anymore. So that lets us off the hook there a bit as well. There's not the same need for private individuals to open their homes to strangers. Interesting aside on this, and there may be other countries in the world where they do this, but my son and his now fiancée recently went to Cuba where they got engaged. Now, yes, I know, they're a little crazy, and they're going and having a honeymoon in Sri Lanka. Don't ask me, I just don't get it. Anyway, in Cuba, it's quite difficult to just go into Cuba as a tourist. You kind of have to have a reason to be there. So my son Shannon teaches history and geography, among other things, at Rostrata College. So he made this his reason for visiting Cuba. But you don't go and stay in a hotel or a motel, you stay with a private family. So it's all set up through the system somehow or other. So these people, they meet you at the airport, off the plane, they take you to their home, you live with the family for, I think they're there for 10 days or something or other, and this family's job while you're there is to look after you. They take you everywhere, to the touristy things you do with them, the places you have to go to tick off the, the official forms, they take you to those places, you eat with the family, do what the family does, and at the end of it, they deliver you back to the airport. So that's Cuba. So it does happen in some places in the world. Alison Gilchrist, creating a culture of welcome in the local church. So she identifies a few issues within the church which may affect hospitality. She writes about introspection, and this is when a church kind of focuses, or a congregation focuses inwards on itself, on its likes and its dislikes, what's convenient, doesn't want to engage in any practice or activity that might be inconvenient or cost it money or put it at risk. One of our community outreach workers told me recently that he was accosted in a public setting. He was taken to task because a stack of chairs had been moved from one side of the door to another in order to facilitate some community activity that he was running. Well, it's funny if it wasn't so serious, but it's that kind of thing and attitudes like it that represent this kind of dangerous, demonic, death-dealing introspection. It's a total lack of concern for mission and people. It's just stuff and property and things. If you want to be in church that's engaged in hospitality, you actually can't afford to be precious about your carpet and or your furniture, because they will get changed around and they will get damaged and stained. Our drop-in centre gets a bit interesting sometime, and a few weeks ago when I was there, a couple of people arced up and had a bit of a disagreement that turned physical, and I was on the phone to the police and trying to figure this out. And then I was trying to keep it inside, outside, but anyhow it moved inside into the chapel, and actually the two girls, I don't mean to be sexist about this, but the women are the worst. We have more fights amongst the women than we do amongst the men. Anyhow, cups of coffee got thrown, everything, and a cup of coffee got thrown up against the wall over one of their really nice banners that somebody from our church had made. The banner's ruined, of course, can't be fixed. It's sad, but that's the risk you take, if you invite unpredictable strangers into your space. Another thing negatively affecting the practice of hospitality is regular attenders seeing worship as a family affair. So this is where those of us who go to church regularly are more interested in catching up with each other than catching up with a travelling stranger, getting to know them, spending some time with them, making them welcome. Now, if we put in half a dozen words with a stranger and rush off to spend half an hour with our friends, have we really done hospitality with a travelling stranger? Then there is the hospitality side of the church's personality being underdeveloped. We can think about churches having a personality. If you think about your church, what would your church's personality be? Would it be gregarious and welcoming? Would it be closed? Would it be difficult? Would it be hard to please? Would it be embracing? If the hospitality side of a church's personality is underdeveloped, it will obviously be a side of the church's personality that's not obvious. It won't be talked about, it won't be preached about, it won't be prayed about, it won't be practiced to any great extent in the sense of to the travelling stranger. And to correct that, or biblical texts on hospitality may not be referred to. It can be corrected. And what you're doing here tonight is part of the correction process. Because you're actually thinking about it, talking about it, praying about it, and taking seeds of it back to wherever you come from. So I would say congratulations. It's great to see so many of you doing that. Yeah. Alison Gilchrist again. We need to stimulate concern for the stranger so that the culture of the church becomes such that everyone's agenda includes it, reducing the responsibility on the few. So hospitality in a church is not just what two people are rostered to do every week. It needs to become the heart and the ethos and the responsibility of the whole congregation. And if I ask, what is hospitality? Most people would say, and you might have a different answer because you've been thinking about this, but most people would say, well, it's having people home for a meal. And it is. That's hospitality. When we have people home for a meal, usually that means people we like, people who are like us, people that we know, people that we are comfortable with, people whose company we enjoy. And that's all hospitality. Yes, it is. But I want to explore for a moment a little more of what hospitality was in the ancient world that might give you some new and fresh ideas about it in your setting. Andrew Arterbury, Entertaining Angels, Early Christian Hospitality in its Mediterranean setting. So Arterbury is writing on the social conventions of hospitality in the biblical context. Hospitality is an extensive set of behavioural conventions that are associated with a host assisting a traveller. The traveller is, by definition, most often a stranger, perhaps even an angel, not so veiled reference to Hebrews chapter 13 verse 2. So if you think about behavioural conventions and think about the Abraham story, it's hot, Abraham's resting under his tent flap. If it was me, I wouldn't want to be disturbed. I'd probably be lying there thinking, I hope these blokes don't notice me, I hope they just keep walking and leave me alone, you know. Not Abraham. No, he jumps up there, he runs out to them and insists that they will stop and receive his hospitality. Water to wash and cool their feet while they rest under a tree. A morsel of bread. Well, this is a little understatement because Sarah gets ordered to baking. Come on, Sarah, get on with it. Abraham picks out the fattened calf. The servant gets put to work to kill it and dress it, cook it. Abraham seems to manage the cheese and the milk. And then Abraham served his guests and waited on them while they ate their morsel of bread. Feast for a king. Another convention of the time concerned travellers needing a safe place to stay overnight. So when they would arrive in a town, they would go to the town square where they would confidently expect that somebody would come out and invite them to spend the night at their home or their compound. There's a story, it's not a very good story, but it's a story, in Judges 19, where this happens. And this is a text that probably belongs in the category of a text of terror, the way it ends up, but it starts out with this bloke and his concubine arriving in Gibeah at sundown, and they go to the town square where they expect that somebody will come and invite them to stay with them, which is what happens, more or less, for the bloke. But the concubine somehow gets left out or something, so she gets abused all night and in the end dies. So it doesn't end well for her and for lots of other people. But the convention of the time was that If you were a travelling stranger, you could arrive in town and confidently expect that somebody would open their home and their heart to you. That's how it would happen. Another behavioural convention of the time in the ancient Greco-Roman world was that, generally speaking, it was not appropriate for the host to ask the guest their name or their business until after the guest had been refreshed with water to wash themselves and food and drink. If you look at the story of Abraham in Genesis 18 and the story in Judges 19, there is no exchange of names given at all in either of those stories. It's actually a practice that we've adopted at our drop-in centre. We've got our own reasons for doing it because some people who come our way want to be anonymous. But it can happen that a person could come to our drop-in centre and they might be there for 3 or 4 weeks or even 3 or 4 months before I would even know their name. Because we don't just go up to somebody and say, "G'day, how are you? I'm so-and-so, what's your name?" We would say, "Well, welcome, come on in, there's the coffee or here's a meal." You get a ticket these days to avoid the chaos. It's still free, but it just helps with the management of things. Here's a meal ticket, there's some snacks, make yourself comfortable, Some people want to just be anonymous. Hospitality is about a host assisting a traveller who is usually by definition a stranger, perhaps an angel. So if we want to be a host and practice this kind of hospitality, and if that is about assisting travellers who are mostly by definition strangers, there is one thing above all else that we have to overcome. And you know what that is, don't you? It's our fear of the stranger. Sarah York she wrote a book called The Holy Intimacy of Strangers, and she writes about our need to be redeemed of our fear of the stranger. Probably all the things that we talk about being redeemed of, that might be a new one. Redeemed of our fear of the stranger in order to practice this kind of hospitality. Redemption into a child's way of trusting is actually a thick, enduring and committed trust that makes thin trust possible. This kind of trust has a spiritual component as it invites us to transcend fear and self-centeredness and takes us beyond the tribal familiarity that characterises most of the trust we nurture in our personal relationships. Our trust is not so much of the other person as it is an expression of faith in the spiritual power that binds us to one another. It's dependent less on the behaviour of the people out there than it is on how we anchor our trust in the Spirit. And that's really important, because when you're doing this kind of hospitality, it just demands a huge degree of trust in the Spirit. This is not an invitation to be foolhardy. It's a call to nurture trust as a value, thus cultivating more trustworthiness in others as well. So I'm not going to pretend there's no risk in welcoming strangers. There is. In our situation, our kitchen staff have duress alarms under the bench. Leaders have access to duress alarms, and they do get activated. So you assess the risks and you take steps to minimise the risks and to deal with them according to your situation. The alternative is to shut out the people that we don't know, to shut out the stranger. And that's kind of scary, because even if you know each other now, you were all strangers to one another once. Even if you're married to the person sitting next to you, once that person was a stranger. So, that's the alternative. We shut out the people we don't know, or they don't look trustworthy, or we don't like the look of them. we shut them out of our churches, and then we expose ourselves to the condemnation of Jesus. I was a stranger and you did not welcome me. And suddenly we find ourselves in the goat yard. One way or another, through prayer, through trusting in God, trusting in the Spirit, sensible planning, working in teams. We have very broad teams, deep teams. And occasionally, as I look back over 13 years, in retrospect, what was foolishness protected by the grace of God, we must be redeemed of our fear of the stranger if we would assist and provide hospitality to the traveller who is by definition a stranger, who just happens to come our way. So you can see that this level of hospitality means going out on a limb. But it's this kind of hospitality that welcomes travellers and strangers that is inherently missional and evangelistic. The flip side of the coin, well, in entertaining a stranger, you might be entertaining Jesus himself. After the crucifixion, a couple of Jesus' followers set out to go home from Jerusalem to Emmaus. They were walking along, talking about how all their hopes and dreams had turned to dust and lay in fragments on the ground. And a stranger joins them. And he says, "What are you guys talking about?" And they welcome him into their space and into their conversation. And at the end of the day, when they get to their place, they invite him in. And so the stranger comes in. And then a strange thing happened. Because the stranger, when it came time for the blessing of the bread, the stranger did it. And that was out of order, because that's the host's job to do that, not the stranger. She's the guest. And what happened was, in this instance, the guest became the host. Took the bread, blessed it, broke it, gave it to them. Their eyes were opened. Had they rejected this moment, had they rejected this stranger, they would never have had those moments with Jesus. Probably heard this word, or maybe don't know the word xenos, but you certainly know xenophobia. Xenos, it means simultaneously guest, host and stranger. So, in entertaining a stranger, we sometimes find out that we're not the host anymore, we're actually the guest. And the guest has become our host, ministering to and giving hospitality to us. And adding to all of this, of course, is the mystique of the presence of Christ in the stranger. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. Oh, good. We're in the sheep yard now. That's good. So I leave you with a curious thought about hospitality, which might cause you some sleepless moments. If you're ever inclined to doubt the value or the significance of hospitality, consider Rahab, the prostitute of Jericho. Rahab lived in a little house in the city wall of Jericho. And when Joshua was lining up to smash down the city and conquer the land, he sent some spies ahead of him to check out things. Well, Rahab made them welcome. And for that, her life and the lives of her family were preserved in the chaos of the conquest of Jericho and the land. But the story doesn't end there. If you read the New Testament, if you ever bother to read the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1, and don't skip over it, start at verse 19, start at verse 1, you find there's 5 women in there. You had to be a woman of some notoriety to get in there, you had to be a Tamar or a Bathsheba or somebody like that. Tamar's in there as well. Rahab is in there. Rahab is there. In the genealogy of Jesus. But it doesn't end there, because you get to the letter of Hebrews, the great chapter of the heroes and the heroines of the faith, Hebrews chapter 11. It's Rahab. Hero of the faith, heroine of the faith. Doesn't end there either. You go on to James. There's Rahab again. Side by side with Abraham in James's great theological discussion of faith and works. And by what works is Rahab the prostitute justified? Well, of course, hospitality. Thanks for listening. Thank you. Sorry. So Rebecca says you may have questions. I also have there are quite a lot of resources to take back into your churches. Video clips. I've got a very funny video clip here that goes about 4 minutes that I could run if you were interested in seeing it, but if you have questions, happy to take any questions as well.
Grant, I spoke to you earlier and expressed how I had been so intrigued that small congregation should deliberately, prior to you becoming their minister, move from their well-established church to another spot further up Prospect Road. Can you share a little of what you know of what motivated that move?
Yes. So what happened was that the congregation had wound down to a point where, the building there, even though it's new on the front, it's only new on the front, and behind it there is an old building which is 100 years old. And it was crippled with salt damp. It needed to be rewired electrically, it needed to be replumbed. The congregation had an asset that was worth $1 million, but they had no cash flow. And I'm told that at the time that they finally quit that place, they didn't even have enough ready cash to pay their minister that week at the time. So they, in effect, there were two things. They came to realise that they were dying in $1 million coffin, and secondly, they came to a conviction that God was calling them to relocate to somewhere that would be amongst the poorer or more disadvantaged people and to establish a mission there. And the lady the minister who led that process, Ruth May, it was, I think, Ruth and her husband Frank were farmers at Balaclava, actually, Frank and Ruth May. Who was from Balaclava. And they left the farm and moved off. Ruth, I think she was 60-something when she started training for ministry. She must have been about 66, I think, when she took over the Prospect congregation. She was 76 when she handed it over to me in 2006. No, that's not old at all. So Ruth led the congregation through that process. She was assisted in that by another state minister at the time, a man by the name of Ian Corlett, who has since died, sadly, way too young. Burnt himself out. Ian cut his teeth in the Kensington high-rise flats in Melbourne and places like that. And Ian worked with the congregation and with Ruth to lead them through this process, and in the end the whole congregation moved without the loss of a single person from that congregation. Now that's a staggering achievement. Yeah. That's a little bit of the story. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Ruth. Yeah.
I actually have a question about sustainability.
Yeah.
I think all of us are in small churches, congregations, and we're looking at maintaining ministers full time. We're looking at perhaps mission helping that sustainability. And I guess the question for me in your model is, has that helped you to become sustainable? Because I hear that you're actually employing people as well. And if so, is the congregation undergirding that, or is there something else undergirding that?
The only two sources of finance that we have are the op shop and direct giving from our congregation. Sustainability is about much more than finance. I haven't addressed it at all tonight, but a big issue in the sustainability of this kind of ministry is it's extremely demanding. And this kind of hospitality has to have a really strong balance with worship and prayer in the background, because it is really, really demanding. It's often volatile. At times it's dangerous and intimidating. So sustainability at that level is probably a bigger issue in my mind than the financial sustainability. But I mean, they're all important. Yeah. You know, working with strangers, I mean, depending on where you are, I mean, our area, the Kilburn area, you know, a lot of you are sort of, you know enough about this area, I suppose, to know, you know, you're always dealing with not just the mentally ill, but people with criminal records, people with violent histories. We've had to have restraining orders taken against people to stop them coming into the area at times. So you still have to have boundaries. You know, you do this kind of broad welcome, and I loved that Isaiah reading that you started off with, because one of my big things is that God's house shall be a house of prayer for all nations. Yeah. But when people become a danger to others, you know, then, you know, we have our processes and our protocols. We have 2 bouncers that operate on Monday as well. And actually they're not members of our church, they're a couple of big guys that just come to the program, you know, and you know, it's about guests becoming hosts, you know, because it's a very powerful thing to be the host and to be the one who's giving out and making the rules, and you know, you do this and you do that and you come and go or whatever. Another part of the risk involved is actually inviting the guest to join your host team. So, you know, we get a couple of big scary guys and we say, well, you guys can be the bouncers and keep the peace, you know. And they do. I mean, they've had to step between people and move people outside, and thankfully they're a lot bigger than me. There again, dare I say, it's only girls that they've had to move out. Never had to move any blokes outside. Don't ask me what it is. It's sad, actually. It's sad. It's sad. Yeah.
Do you have rules? I mean, is there a no smoking policy, no alcohol policy?
We do. We have, no alcohol, no drugs. You know, if people bring a bottle in, and even if it's clear, you know, I might say, look, you know, I need to just have a smell of that. Not for my benefit, but drugs as well, you know, if we're aware that people might be dealing drugs. But the funny thing is, there's no one more self-righteous than a reforming drug addict, and they can smell a dealer, you know, and they'll come and they say, oh, you know, so-and-so is dealing drugs, don't you? You know, they know it as better than we know. Yeah. We do have rules. We have rules around what times people come and go to protect our team. So we don't open our doors until 11 o'clock. The door's locked until 11 o'clock, because otherwise people just come and go. And we've got people that are working in the kitchen and getting stuff ready from 8 o'clock, quarter to 8 in the morning. And at 10 o'clock we sit down and we have what we call a team meeting, which is really lots of telling stories and catching up with news with each other. We talk about any important issues that need to be talked about, and we pray together. and we protect that space. If people were disruptive of the peace, and from time to time we ask people, look, you know, you've done this, said this, or you know, you are not to come for 4 weeks, and we bar people at times, yeah, because people have to respect the place, and they have to respect other people's right. You know, we want to create a safe place, and if somebody's making it unsafe for themselves and other people, then we have to take action, because you've got to protect other people in the space. There is a good, interesting conversation around, you know, this kind of hospitality, and does that mean that anything goes? And it doesn't. But it does mean, and again you touched on this before, Ruth Mary, that as long as people are not being disruptive and making the place unsafe for other people, it's God's job to fix people. You know, it's not our job to fix people. I have a deep appreciation of Jesus' words in John 16, that it's the work of the God through the Spirit to convict of sin and righteousness and judgment. You know, it's not my job to convince you that you're a sinner. You probably know it already. And it's not my job to fix you, any more than it's, you know, it's God's job to fix you. If you've got a drug problem, I can't fix your drug problem, but God can. So, yeah, that's where this trust in the Spirit is really important. A deep reliance that God through the Spirit can actually bring about change in people. We've seen it happen countless times over there. Yeah. Yes.
I love what you're saying. What you're saying in the context talks about ministry to what I hear a particular group of people. Are there any practical experiences of where redeeming the trusted stranger works in a more middle class or upper class environment, or are they unusual?
No, I'm sure that there are, but I've been embedded in one of Adelaide in South Australia's lowest socioeconomic, most dysfunctional areas for the past 13 years. But previous to that, I had spent my ministries, you know, at Mount Barker and Narracourt. I mean, Narracourt was one of the state's wealthiest areas at a point in time. I believe that Narracourt has a reputation for giving the most amount of money per capita to the war effort during the Second World War. Very, very wealthy farmers and people down there. There's somebody here. Even Morwell, although Morwell is more an industrial coal mining town. But yeah, so I'm not sort of judging at all in terms of middle class or upper class. Everybody's redeemable. Speaking about my experience, which in a sense was quite well, I have to admit I didn't expect it. You know, like I say, I thought I was going there to bury these people, to grieving the loss of their crumbly old 100-year-old building. You know, within 18 months, we had a congregation or worship attended list of nearly 90 people in 18 months. And it was just absolute chaos, with about a third of those people were African refugees, so they had all their hurts and scars of war and trauma and torture. And then a third of the congregation were people from Kilburn, and, you know, 1 in 3 had a mental health issue. You know, after about 3 or 4 years, I had 5 former church attenders in jail all at the same time. Everything from breaking and entering and false imprisonment to murder, you know, so yes, just my experience has been in nearly 40 years of ministry, though, that I actually have seen more response to the gospel in these last 13 years than I did in my other ministries. And, you know, I guess the bottom line is that the middle class materialistic life is fairly satisfying, you know, until something really goes wrong, and you don't really need God too much. But most of these people have tried everything else, and they had nothing else. You know, they were the prodigal son sitting in a pigsty with nowhere else to go. And our church was there, and the doors were open, and something was happening. And it's the middle of the shopping centre. They're all walking past to either the shopping centre or the post office or the pet store or the brothel, which was across the road at the time. But I don't know if we put that out of their business or not, but anyway. Or the massage parlour, I'm not sure about that. The guy did come down and hand out flyers. He wanted girls to work there, but I said... anyway, that didn't work either. So, yeah, it's just that there's just been this response. A lot of the people, many of the people who have come would find it hard to articulate their faith, but the nature of the community is that they'll say, oh, this is where I belong, this is my home, this is where I feel at peace. But if you ask them to articulate it in terms of faith and gospel, forget it. Thank you. Thanks for...
Don't go too far. We've got a little thank you card and a little gift in there to thank you for your time tonight, and it's very helpful, and thank you for handing the stuff on the grounds, because we'll pass that information around. And it is fun going to visit Grant's church. What I can tell you is the safe is still there. I don't know if you've ever actually locked anyone in there. The bank safe. Not yet? No. After 13 years, that's pretty good, because I've met some of the people there, and we used to have meetings together.
The only bloke that knew the code for the door has died.
So, thank you, Grant. Getting ready for tomorrow night. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Which may be of interest, and I'm beating my own drum here a little. When I was finishing my master's studies, the lecturers had run out of things for me to study, believe it or not. So I said I would develop a Bible study, a series of Bible studies on hospitality, on this stuff. So it's sitting somewhere on my computer, and I'm happy to share it around. Yeah.
So they were never published, Grant?
No, they've never been published.
To get media come onto that. All right. So if you're looking for a study on hospitality, Advent study, sometime next year, Grant's your man. Right, let's pray. Thank you, God, for this opportunity to gather together, to hear some stories, to reflect on your word, and to hopefully be inspired about our ministry and our discipleship. We pray for safe journeys home tonight and for restful sleeps before the fun of tomorrow begins. We offer these prayers to you through Christ our Lord. Amen.